Welcome to Tax Sale Insiders, the latest from Tax Sale Resources, bringing you information about tax sales from experts in the industry. We interviewed Austin Barnes, an attorney with Sandhu Law Group based in Cleveland, Ohio. With over 30 years of tax foreclosure experience, Austin takes us down the long tax sale process road in the Buckeye State. Whether you are looking to understand the bulk versus negotiated lien sales or how the actual tax foreclosure or deed sale process works, Austin has our answers. So sit back and relax for another episode of Tax Sale Insiders, powered by Tax Sale Resources.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Tax Sale Insiders. And I'm Brian Seidensticker, your host and CEO of Tax Sale Resources. And with me today, I have Austin Barnes. And Austin is an attorney with the Sandhu Law Group here in Ohio. And welcome, Austin. I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Well, we got lucky enough to snag some of your time. I guess, Austin, you and I have known each other for quite a while, met through the National Tax Lien Association at one of their events, but not everybody else on the line knows you. So give us a little bit of background of how you got into tax liens, and I guess, and how does your experience, set you apart from most attorneys in this space?
Thank you, Brian. Yes, I started my career with the Summit County, Ohio Prosecutor's Office. I worked there from 91 to 99, and in that position, among other duties, I would represent the county treasurer in all the foreclosure actions he brought for real estate tax foreclosures. I would handle the third-party answers for primarily banks that would file foreclosure, and then I would file motions for relief from stay in the bankruptcy cases and proofs of claim. And I would also defend the county auditor's value at the County Board of Revision, as well as down in Columbus at the Ohio State Board of Tax Appeals. Then I went to work for a tax lien purchaser in Cleveland, Ohio for about 6 years. I started there as a due diligence manager and worked my way up to be vice president of the company. And again, I did much the same type of work there as I did in the prosecutor's office, bringing foreclosure actions, taking care of creditor side bankruptcy matters, filing the proofs of claim, motions for relief from stay, and other associated cases with bankruptcy. And then I would also file occasionally a complaint with the County Board of Revision to reduce the amount of taxes that we would have to pay as the tax lien purchaser. And from that position, then I started working in private law firms, doing both mortgage foreclosure work as well as tax foreclosure work, and do evictions, the creditor side bankruptcy work as well.
Got it. So you've obviously been on uniquely both sides of the argument when it comes to tax foreclosures, which certainly helps from a strategic perspective. But so you've obviously been doing this a long time. How many years have you been in the industry, would you say, altogether?
This will be my 30th year.
30th year, yeah. So
I don't know if that's always a positive, but
you're a lifer.
Yeah, and I think my experience on the government side with a tax lien purchaser, investor, as well as the private law firms sets me apart from most people, because most people only have experience in one or two of those areas. Very few have experience in all three of those areas.
Yeah, yes, I agree. There's certainly haven't spoken to many folks, and there's kind of multiple levels of being educated in this space, and there's kind of the, I guess, attorneys that obviously can do a good job but don't know much about the space, and typically have a lot to learn. And then you've got the next level of, at least from one angle, have been in it for a long time, understand what they're doing. And then I guess you're kind of a whole another level of, you not only have been doing it a long time, understand it, but you understand both sides of that argument, which is very unique, at least from my experience, Austin. So greatly appreciate you joining us. Before I get too far, I kind of forgot, and I had scribbled on this. This is actually the cover page for the white paper that Austin wrote, and you'll be able to access after this webinar is complete. I made a note on there in Kentucky. I didn't realize it, but Sandu Law also provides services in Kentucky. And we're not going to talk about Kentucky today. We're going to talk about Ohio. So let's just jump right into it, Austin. We'll start with the basics. Do you consider Ohio a tax lien state, a tax deed state, or both?
Definitely a tax lien state, unlike say Georgia is a tax deed state. In Ohio, the county treasurer sells a county tax certificate, and you have that certificate in order to foreclose if needed, in order to recoup your investment, make some return off the interest, and the associated reimbursement of fees and costs.
And yeah, definitely tax lien. Do you think because the sale or foreclosure sale or auction that's required is more of a traditional foreclosure auction as opposed to a separate tax deed sale, the sheriff's sale? They have those, but you don't necessarily consider them a tax deed auction. Would that be accurate?
Yes, with a tax lien, you're able to bring a foreclosure, and you should get good title to the property after that foreclosure. In a tax deed state where you buy a lien, it will only provide you with a tax deed. You would still have a quiet title action to bring in those states in order to get marketable title.
Got it. And you bring up a very good point, which is entirely unique to, I believe, Ohio and Kentucky, and maybe there's other states that I'm not aware of, but it's the additional quiet title action that's required for tax deeds. And in Ohio, for those deeds that you end up with, it's not required, which is entirely unique. I don't know, I guess, Austin, do you know any of these states beyond Ohio and Kentucky that have that sort of robust foreclosure process that offers a insurable title at the end of the process?
I know there are several other states. I'm not real familiar with them. I'm only familiar with Georgia because I did some work with Georgia when I worked for the private tax lien investor. Got it.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I don't either. Doesn't mean they're out there. There might be a viewer that knows of one. Always like that input. But in general, most states, the deed you end up with, as Austin said, requires additional quiet title action or a process to get insurable title, and in Ohio, you don't. Okay, I guess I know a bit about Ohio, and I know it's a unique structure in this. For these lien sales, it's more of a bulk sale or a bulk contract per se. So how exactly do the sales work? And maybe if it's easier just to pick a county, maybe let's pick Franklin County, which is Columbus, home of Ohio State, and how is it accurate to say it's an RFP type of process?
Yes, yeah, request for proposal. Yeah, almost all of the counties that have sold tax liens in Ohio do what's called a negotiated sale under 5721.33, as opposed to the bulk sale under 5721.22, or excuse me, 32. Under 5721.32, that's the section that covers bulk sales in Ohio. You have a bidder registration form, a $500 refundable fee if you're not the successful bidder at the sale, certificate issuance fee charged by the county treasurer. You obtain a letter from a financial institution stating that you have the resources and the ability to pay the amount that you're going to bid at the sale. And bidding starts at 18% simple interest and goes down in 1/4% increments all the way down to 0. And the bid is awarded to the lowest interest bid. That's one of the key differences between a bulk sale and a negotiated sale. With a negotiated sale, the county treasurer has sole discretion as to who he gives the purchase to. He can take into consideration the longevity of the company, the overall financial condition of the company. Basically, the treasurer can make a decision for the whole county based on, usually the track record of that tax lien investor. And also, it gives you greater flexibility in a negotiated sale. You can bid with a premium or a discount. Largely, it'll depend on the type of area it is, whether you choose to engage in bidding a premium for, say, higher quality suburbs, or if you offer a discount on, perhaps more inner city type properties. And you can negotiate the time frame. You have to get what's called a notice of intent to foreclose when you purchase under a negotiated sale. And that's one of the main differences between a mortgage foreclosure and a tax lien foreclosure, is that you have this thing called a notice of intent to foreclose. It's obtained under 5721.37B2. And with that, you're paying up any tax liens that have accrued on the property subsequent to the last tax certificate you purchased. And then you are normally given just 120 days to proceed to foreclosure. Now, that's another term that can be negotiated in a negotiated sale under 5721.33. You could negotiate a higher number. You could negotiate a lower number, but usually what I've seen is a higher number of days, maybe up to 180, to bring that first foreclosure action. You can also designate the amount of attorney's fees that will be charged under the statute 5721.371. You're basically given that any fee $2,500 or less is presumed reasonable. You could put in the contract a number higher or lower than that, and that would be taken into consideration when you go to do the foreclosure. Also, a key difference between the bulk sale and the negotiated sale is that with a negotiated sale, the purchaser has to submit an affidavit to the treasurer. And there's a big pitfall, or potential pitfall, if you don't submit that affidavit. The penalty for that is failure to submit the affidavit renders the potential investor ineligible to buy the certificates. And if you make a false or misleading statement in that affidavit, you can be banned for a period of up to 5 years from purchasing in that county. So there's a big potential penalty if you don't submit that affidavit.
Interesting. Okay, so one thing I do love about this industry is the fact that I learned something, at least one thing every day, just because every state's different, and even if you think you know a state, there's always little nuances. And I guess what I just realized, Austin, in your description, is the fact that there's two different types of bulk sales in the right term, because that's actually one of the two types, but two different types of that sale that go on in Ohio, most using this negotiated sale, which sounds like there's a boatload of knobs and levers to negotiate that sale. And then it really comes down to the discretion of the treasurer to decide who's the winning buyer, right? Whether it's a premium they pay, you could be the best, bid per se, having the highest premium and the lowest interest rate. But that still doesn't mean you're necessarily going to win, because there may be another purchaser that has a better record or is willing to have a longer foreclosure period. I don't know what treasurers exactly look for, but there's a lot that goes into it beyond just a bid. And then on the other hand, you've got these bulk purchases, which sounds like it's much more straightforward. You're buying the whole data tape, you're buying the whole tape of liens, and you are bidding down, from 18% down, and the lowest bid wins, and that's the end of the day, assuming you have the capability to buy it. Do I understand that right?
Yep, that's right. With the bulk sale, the treasurer has to take the lowest bid on the interest rate.
Interesting. Okay. Now you said most counties in Ohio use the negotiated sale route. Right. Okay. Now, does the negotiated sale also allow some ability for the purchaser to say, I like all of these liens, but these are technically worthless. I don't want them included in that purchase. Is there any sort of that level of negotiation as well?
Yes. You can attempt to exclude certain liens. If there's an individual property or a few individual properties that you don't want to invest in, you can make that known to the county treasurer, and the county treasurer may accommodate that request, or they may say, no, it's important for us to have this group of liens, and we want your best bid, including those liens. And then you have to either decide if you're going to bid in that county, or that you adjust your bid in order to take in those properties that you really didn't want to buy a lien on.
Gotcha. Interesting. I guess out of curiosity, and if you don't know, Austin, I understand, because you're not really traditionally part of the whole negotiation side of it. Your part comes in later when you start to file that notice of intent. But do you have any idea like how large some of these sales are? I'm sure we're not talking, $5,000, $10,000. We're talking millions of dollars in many of these larger counties in Ohio, correct?
Yeah, most of them are multiple millions. Some of the larger ones are, say, Cuyahoga County, which generally is between 10 and 14 million. Some of the smaller ones would be like Hamilton County, usually well under 5 million.
Interesting. Okay, so it's not this is not a sale for the beginning investor per se.
No, it's not going to be the mom and pop type that does scoop together $100,000 or even $1 million.
Yeah.
$1 million in this game doesn't get you very far.
Got it. Unless it's some of the smaller counties, Scioto County maybe, or some of the smaller rural counties, you might be able to, but they might not even have negotiated sales, right? There may be a bulk purchase situation. I guess in both cases, you still got to come up with the total amount, so it doesn't matter. Interesting. Okay, so they're pretty.
Say that there's about 44 counties that have engaged in tax sales. The other half of the 88 counties in Ohio haven't conducted a tax sale yet.
I don't know if I'm opening Pandora's box here, but what do they do if they don't have a tax sale? They just they go straight to a sheriff foreclosure sale down the road, or they just sits forever?
Well, they farm it out to their prosecutor's office, and they will take on that project as best they can. And back when tax liens first started in Ohio, which was 1998, it was limited to those counties with a population greater than 200,000, which in essence brought it down to only 12 counties were eligible to sell tax certificates. Only those counties with a population greater than 200,000. It wasn't until several years later, maybe a decade or so, that they opened it up to where any county in Ohio could sell tax liens. And some of the discussion in reading over the notes from the legislature was that some counties didn't want the ability to sell tax liens because they were afraid, especially in those smaller counties, that a large percentage of their constituents might take offense to them selling liens to an outside investor, and so they didn't want to even have the ability to sell. But then after some of these larger counties were selling the liens and doing quite well with them, then more wanted the ability. And so that's what brought on the change in statute that allowed any state, regardless of population, to sell tax certificates.
Interesting. Interesting. So the statutes allow any county to now have these sales, but only about half of the counties do today. Is there, what would an investor need to do in order to, I mean, or is that even an opportunity to reach out to those other, the other half that don't have these sales and see if they would be interested? Is that an option, or have those counties basically said, no, we don't want to do them, don't ask? Or do you know?
Yeah, you would, I would, if it was me going into a county that hasn't sold tax certificates before, I would approach the county treasurer, and then that person will let you know if he has like a tax lien administrator that would take care of the delinquent taxes. And, if it wasn't the elected official, that person would let you know if there is someone else that you should be talking to. And that would be my first place I would start.
Interesting. Excellent. Okay. Well, I'll pull us back out of that rabbit hole a little bit and get back to the basics. So regarding interest, and you mentioned, bidding on the packages, you start at 18 and you can bid down, and you can bid a premium. How exactly does the interest work? Is there I'll say a penalty interest that's automatic? Like Florida, I guess, is the most popular county that has an automatic 5% penalty. Is there anything like that in Ohio?
Well, in the negotiated sales, it's basically whatever interest you bid at. In the bulk sales, there is a provision that you could bid the interest all the way down to zero. If you did that, you'd be stuck at zero. But if you bid at least 0.25%, you can get the alternative return, which is 6%. Not that that's a great return, but hey, today with the extremely low interest rates from the Fed, you might be able to make a little bit of return even on 6%. But the code section that covers this is 5721.30E, and it allows for the greater of 6% of the certificate rate of interest, so that you would bid at least 0.25% in order to preserve that 6% floor, so to speak.
Got it. And that's for bulk purchases only. Now, is that 6% calculated monthly, or is that an automatic? I call it a penalty, where if you redeem the next day, you still pay 6%.
It would be a simple interest,
okay,
monthly. And the way Ohio works is that when you first purchase the tax lien, you don't have interest for that month. Mm-hmm. That's why you tend to see the sale dates very close to the 30th of each month, because you don't get any interest for that first month. So they try to keep that just to 1 or 2 business days, and then you start accruing the interest the following month, and it will accrue on the first of each month, starting with the month after you buy the lien.
Got it. Okay, so if you're participating in a let's say a negotiated sale, right? You said I will bid 14%. That 14% is simple interest, monthly, and you do not get interest the first month of the, not the first 30 days, but if the sale is on the 31st of that month, then you really only miss a day. Interest starts calculating that following month, correct?
Right.
Got it.
Basically 1/12 of that interest each month.
Got it. Okay. Okay. I guess beyond interest, I guess how long is the redemption? How does the redemption process work after I participated in that negotiated sale? And I apologize, I want to take a quick step back, only because I'd heard recently that you can participate in a negotiated sale, and you can actually end up buying multiple years of those taxes in that negotiated sale. So you're not just buying 2020 taxes. You can say, I am going to provide funding, or I'm going to buy your tax liens for 3 years, right? A multi-year sort of contract. Is that such a thing in Ohio?
Yes, you can do that. And you can also state that you will take any subsequent lien, meaning a year after the year in which you bought the portfolio, that you want to have the right of first refusal on that subsequent lien for X number of years. And it's quite common that people will bid on a package for 3 years at a time.
Got it. Okay. So that's common practice. And another thing that I learned to be a fact today. I'd heard it, and now we know for sure. Okay. So back to redemption. How does redemption work? How long does it go? Are there things that need to be done during that redemption period by the lien holder at that point? They've purchased the package. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes. Under the public auction, 5721.32, you would only have 1 year to enter a redemption payment plan with the county treasurer. Or if you do enter a negotiated process, you can enter a redemption payment plan as long as that plan ends on or before the expiration date of that tax certificate. In Ohio, the common terms for the tax liens is between 3 years and 6 years. Under the bulk sale provision, it can only be from 3 years to 6 years. But technically, under the negotiated sale, somebody could negotiate as little as 1 year or a maximum of 6 years. So there is greater flexibility with the negotiated sale on that end as well, as far as the redemption period. And also, under the negotiated sale, if you enter into a redemption payment plan, it's important to notify the county treasurer in writing. You would probably do that through a monthly report that you would send to the county treasurer's office. And you would indicate somehow that the following parcels are on a payment plan. And you can put a red flag out there or any type of marker that you come up with, you can agree with the county treasurer on using. And that would let them know that the taxpayer entered into a redemption payment plan. And then it's you have to do that within 60 days of them entering the redemption payment plan. And also, if somebody falls off that payment plan, you have to notify the county treasurer within 90 days that they have defaulted. And if you do that, then you can extend the term of the tax certificate. It tolls the expiration of the tax certificate by the length of time that someone's in that redemption payment plan and not in default. That's why it's so important that you notify them both going into the plan and upon a default. And if you do that, you can get a little longer term in order to collect your money if you have to resort to a foreclosure.
So the taxpayer can enter into an agreement with the lien holder directly on that redemption payment plan. They don't have to go through the county?
Yeah, the only time you would go through the county is if you have the resources available to pay that lien off within a year, then you might as well go with the county treasurer. But otherwise, most people need more than 1 year. So if they bought under a negotiated sale, then you would want to call that tax certificate purchaser and see what term you can work out with them.
Got it. Oh, got it. Okay. So it sounds like the redemption period is really governed by, in at least the counties that have the negotiated sale, it's the the redemption period that's negotiated as part of that sale, right? It could be 1 year, it could be 5 years. I guess you could do, you know, is there a limit of how long you could do, or is this whatever the investor and treasurer agreed to?
The limit in Ohio is 6 years.
Okay.
You'll see that quite often, say for example, Franklin County, they sell liens normally for a 4-year term. Some counties do only 3-year terms. Some will do a 6-year term 1 or 2 times, and then they go back down to 3 years. So they have a lot of flexibility in what they do. I haven't seen anybody do a 1-year term yet, but under the negotiated sale process, it is possible.
Got it. Now, is there, okay, so during that redemption period, are there any other notifications the lien holder has to send out? You mentioned this notice of intent to foreclose. I'm assuming that's what you do when the lien holder decides, okay, I can't wait anymore. I'm going to file a foreclosure on it. But is there any other notifications that go out post sale saying, hey, you have a lien on your home that was purchased by my company, and if you have any questions, contact. Is there any sort of required notification like that needs to go out?
There are notifications that the statute puts the burden on the county treasurer to send out prior to the tax certificate sale. And now some of those counties will ask the tax certificate investor if they can generate the notice, and they agree on some type of form that's sent out to each taxpayer. And so while the onus is technically on the county treasurer, they can ask the tax certificate investor to take up the responsibility for that. And then the foreclosure process for the tax certificate foreclosure is much like any other civil proceeding on a foreclosure, say a bank foreclosure. You would draft your complaint and you determine the parties to name by getting what's called a preliminary judicial report. And that's a report that gives you the status of the title, who the title is vested in, and all lien holders. That could be second mortgages, state of Ohio, Department of Taxation liens, IRS liens, any type of lien should show up on that report. And then you give the named parties in the action 28 days to answer the complaint. And after that time period has been exhausted to answer, then you can file your dispositive motions, which is a motion for default for those parties that failed to answer. And you can also file a motion for summary judgment against those parties that did answer the complaint. And then the next step would be getting the decree of foreclosure or the judgment of foreclosure. Terms are used interchangeably. And that will give you judgment in the case. And then you can go to sale either by county sheriff or private selling officer. And then the property would go to sale. And here's where the other difference is between mortgage foreclosures and tax lien foreclosures, is that with tax foreclosures, there's always 2 potential sale dates. They're normally about 2 weeks apart from each other. You'll have a first sale date, and if the property fails to sell at that sale, then normally it would go up for sale again in 2 weeks. Now, you can get greater flexibility with a private selling officer because you can postpone the second sale after the first sale. And so you don't have to necessarily do the second sale 2 weeks later, but you would have to postpone the sale in order to stretch out the time period. And I believe that what some private selling officers attempt to do is garner more interest in the property before it comes up for a sale at the second time. Because then if it doesn't sell at that second sale, instead of being deeded out to the third-party purchaser, it will be forfeited back to the tax lien investor. And then that becomes a piece of REO, real estate owned. And that's probably the last thing that any bank or tax lien investor wants, is a lot of real estate owned. because you now have to pay the current taxes, you have to pay to maintain the property, all those joys of home ownership or vacant land ownership. It's both a blessing and liability.
Interesting. Okay, so kind of summarize a little bit of that the notice of intent to foreclose. You have to wait at least a year from the original lien sale date, and you can wait up to 6 years, but you can file that anytime in that time frame. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can file the notice of intent to foreclose up to the day before the tax lien expires. It's not wise to do a very large number of them that close, but you could. And you do have to wait that 1 year when you first buy the portfolio.
Okay. And that notice of intent as part of the negotiated sale would say, you have to wait a period of time before you actually start the foreclosure. And that can vary depending on what was negotiated, right? Is that 3 months, 6 months, etc.?
Well, once you file the notice of intent to foreclose, you've already waited that minimum period of 1 year. And so after you could file it the next day, after you receive it back from the county treasurer, you could file the foreclosure action the next day.
Okay, so it's not necessarily that part of it or how long you're going to wait. That's part of the negotiated sale. After you file the intent, it's how long you wait until you file that notice of intent. So some will say, I'll wait longer than 1 year. I'll wait 2 years or 3 years. Is that how that works?
You could put that in writing. I don't think that would be in the tax investor's best interest, but they could do that. I think where the bigger benefit comes into play is that instead of having only 120 days to file the foreclosure action, if you put in that written agreement with the county treasurer that you get, for example, 180 days, 210 days, I think that would give the tax lien investor more options, more flexibility in bringing those actions, because some counties even have certain time frames when they want you to file or don't want you to file. They don't. The counties that have those restrictions usually don't want you to file right around the time that they're collecting 1/2 worth of the taxes, because if you file during that period, that kind of throws them off as far as what they are going to expect from you to pay for that notice of intent. I think most of them would rather you wait until after the tax collection period has ended and then sell that other half's worth of taxes to you. Got it.
Okay. Now, is there anything that changes when you file that notice of intent from an interest, rate perspective? Does it change from, let's say you bid it down and you want it at 10, does it change to 18 once you file that notice of intent, or does it just keep going at that 10?
It does bump the interest rate up to 18% from whatever it was. So if you bought the portfolio, for example, at 15%, you may want to file that notice of intent to foreclose as soon as that 1 year expires, so that you can bring that rate of return up to 18% immediately. And that can be beneficial, especially in some counties where the county treasurer does a real good job of scrubbing the portfolio for you. And sometimes those interest rates go down into single digits, even below 1%. And the only way that you can, get a decent return is to file that notice of intent immediately after that 1 year crops up, and then you can start earning 18%. And you also earn 18% on any subsequent lien you buy. So even if you bid the portfolio down to, say, 12%, when you buy that subsequent lien gets an interest rate of 18%.
Is there any, subsequent liens, are they required to be purchased by the lien holder, or is it optional, or is that?
Usually it would be optional. I believe the county treasurers would prefer the tax lien investor to buy them. but you can opt out of buying a subsequent lien usually, unless you did write that into your negotiated sale agreement. Then you might be bound to buy that for a fixed number of years.
Got it. And I guess you could theoretically continue to buy those subs for up to 5.5 or 6 years, 5.5, somewhere in there.
It would be possible, but again, most tax lien agreements that are negotiated for a period of 3 years.
Okay.
Now, somebody couldn't negotiate a 5-year term, but that's normally not done. It's usually a 3-year term.
Got it. Okay. All right. I guess tell me, you explained the whole foreclosure process, and I'm going to throw a giant wrench into all of that because bankruptcy comes up not on a very regular basis, but I'd say much more common with tax lien foreclosures compared to many other foreclosures. So can you describe to me a little bit about how bankruptcy filings affect the whole, from the tax lien purchase through the foreclosure, and whether it's Chapter 7, 13 or 11, like how that varies?
Yes. Once a bankruptcy is filed, now you go out of the state statutes for the most part, and you're immediately into federal statutes, the bankruptcy code. And the bankruptcy code is the same across the country. So, there is more stability in the code that you use, that now you've got one code that covers the entire United States of America. But bankruptcy tends to have a lot of state-specific requirements, and they will have local rules. And so, for example, in Ohio, you have the Northern District, which covers, places like Cleveland, Toledo, Youngstown. Then we have the Southern District, which might cover like Columbus, Dayton. And there'll be different local rules for the Northern as opposed to the Southern District. So you have to be aware of those. Also, you have a question of when the bankruptcy is filed. If the bankruptcy is filed prior to entering the negotiated sale or bulk sale, if you find out that there was a bankruptcy filed for that taxpayer, then you want to go back to the county treasurer and ask them to void that certificate. And a void can happen under 5721.34. Another provision is 5721.31A1C. And if you find that the bankruptcy was filed prior to the tax sale of those tax liens, then you want to ask for the county to buy it back from you. Also, from the moment that a person files a bankruptcy petition, whether it's a Chapter 7, 11, or 13, there's what's called an automatic stay. And what the automatic stay is you are stopped from taking further collection activities until one of a few things happen. One, you could ask for relief from stay, get that granted, and then you could proceed. The other would be that the bankruptcy trustee may abandon that asset, and then you should be able to proceed. Sometimes you need the abandonment by the trustee as well as closure of the bankruptcy case. And that would, in essence, make the property no longer part of the bankruptcy estate. But to get back to your main question of what happens when a Chapter 7 is filed, that is a liquidation proceeding. And that can be filed by an individual or a corporation. With that is where you would say that you want to get relief from stay, file a motion for relief from stay and have the court grant it, hopefully, or the property is abandoned and no longer made part of the bankruptcy estate. And there's always an overall provision that if a debtor fails to name someone, a creditor, in the bankruptcy, that stay, while it still applies to you, if you didn't receive proper notice by the debtor naming you in the case, then you can escape the potential problems associated with that. And there's a case on point in Ray Walsh in the Northern District of Ohio that if you proceeded and you didn't have notice, basically you're not going to be penalized for that violation of the stay. In most Chapter 7 cases, the creditor does not have to file a proof of claim. In fact, you'll get a notice that tells you you do not need to file a proof of claim unless you receive a notice to file a proof of claim. So probably over 90% of the cases, you don't file a proof of claim in the Chapter 7. One reason for that is that the Chapter 7 proceeding usually only lasts on average 3 to 4 months. So it's probably to your advantage as the investor to just wait that time period out and then proceed. Then someone could file under Chapter 13, and only individuals can file a Chapter 13. No corporations, no LLCs can file Chapter 13s. And that's, again, where the debtor has to list all of the debts and any defaults. And you can proceed with filing a proof of claim. And you may want to see if there is a reason to ask for relief from stay. And one of the most common grounds for asking for relief from stay is that the taxpayer fails to pay the current taxes. If the next 6-month bill comes in, that taxpayer doesn't pay it, that's grounds for relief. So you don't want to buy that as a tax lien investor, because that can be your basis for filing the motion for relief from stay, is because the debtor failed to pay his current taxes.
Got it. So if you're notified of a Chapter 13, right, and you're the lien holder, you're basically just suggesting don't pay that next sub, right? See if the taxpayer will pay that sub, and if not, it gives you full grounds to file a stay, which allows you to basically proceed as if the bankruptcy doesn't apply to you anymore. Is that accurate?
Because part of the Chapter 13 form requires you to pay all current taxes as they come due. Okay. A lot of people that are delinquent taxpayers kind of keep in that mentality that, oh, I don't have to pay my taxes while I'm in bankruptcy. Wrong. You do have to pay the taxes. If you don't, that gives the tax certificate investor grounds to ask for relief from stay. Then if you don't have the money available, which most of the time you won't, because you're working on a budget and you're not supposed to have thousands of dollars sitting in your checking account to pay something that wasn't in the budget. Yeah, that's a way that a lot of tax certificate investors could find grounds for asking for relief from stay. Also, you want to, when you file the proof of claim, no matter under what chapter, you want to make sure that you file it asking for what was due as of the date of filing the bankruptcy petition. So whenever that petition was filed, it's always time-stamped on a certain day at a certain time. You want to calculate what was due at that time, not necessarily when you found out about the bankruptcy, but when they actually filed the bankruptcy petition. And you want to make sure that your proof of claim only asks for interest on those items that you're allowed to collect interest on, such as the tax certificate purchase price, basically reimbursement of the treasurer's fee, not things like your attorney's fees from the state court proceedings. If you've entered a foreclosure, you don't want to ask for interest on fees and costs. The exception would be if you put that in your negotiated sale agreement. Some tax certificate purchasers do that. Some treasurers won't allow that. And so it depends on what you negotiate as to whether you can get interest on fees. But you want to make sure that you only ask for interest on those items that you can collect interest on. Otherwise, you could draw the attention of the U.S. trustee, which you don't want to do.
Definitely not.
That person's attention, he could require you as the tax lien investor to come forward with what have you done in other bankruptcy cases, not just in Ohio, but across the country. So if you're a tax lien investor in several states, that could be a big accounting nightmare for your accounting department.
Interesting. Now you bring up fees. I don't mean to derail the bankruptcy discussion, but I think it's an important point to talk about. There's obviously an expense to filing for foreclosure and going through that proceeding. I guess two questions, Austin. One is, are those fees incurred, attorney fees and probably filing fees and advertising fees, all that, are they, one, reimbursable? And then two, if do they earn interest? Sounds like they definitely don't earn interest, but are they at least reimbursable if upon redemption?
Yeah, they normally won't get interest unless you did include that in your negotiated sale. Now, whether you can collect them or not, you can always put them in, but when you put them in your proof of claim, you have a secured portion and an unsecured portion. And you would put the attorney's fees and costs in the unsecured portion. And then you're under whatever the debtor put in his plan. There are 100% plans where it won't make any difference. They're going to pay you 100% of what's due to the unsecured creditors as well as to the oversecured creditors or those that are wholly secured. But a vast majority of the plans are, say, 0 to 10%. And by 0 to 10%, that means you may only get 10% of the amount that you paid. So if you paid $2,000 in attorney's fees, court costs, you may get $200 if it's a 10% plan. If it's a 0% plan, you may get zero on that unsecured portion. You'll still collect everything that you would get on the oversecured portion, but you're probably only going to get a small percentage of what's due to you on the unsecured portion.
Got it.
Or your bankruptcy fees and costs and your foreclosure fees and costs. Unsecured portion.
So you can ask for them, but there's no guarantee you will get them. It just depends on the plan.
Yeah, it's going to depend on whether you're in they're not all 0 to 10%. They're not all 100%. There are percentages in between, but it's whatever that percentage is what you will get, once that plan is confirmed.
Okay. Well, sorry to derail that. Was there anything else related to the bankruptcy that you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, just a little bit. I'll touch very lightly on Chapter 11s just because they're not nearly as prevalent as Chapter 13s and 7s. With a Chapter 11, that can be filed by a corporation or an individual. You'll usually see Chapter 11s filed by corporations or very high net worth individuals might also file a Chapter 11. But it's more expensive on the debtor side to fund that Chapter 11 plan as opposed to a Chapter 13 plan. If you're high enough net worth, then you may not qualify to file a Chapter 13. You may have to file a Chapter 11. But that's almost another course in itself, as far as Chapter 11s go. With Chapter 11s, you do always want to file a proof of claim. And one thing to look out for if you get notice of a Chapter 11 filing is that your time for filing a proof of claim is probably going to be on a much shorter road than on a Chapter 13. The bankruptcy court will set a date by which you must file a proof of claim. That's called the bar date. After that date, you can be excluded from being able to file the proof of claim. You'll have a much shorter time span to file the proof of claim in a Chapter 11. And I think that'll give most people at least ideas of what they need to look out for with bankruptcy filings.
I'll take the key takeaway I would encourage is you definitely engage an attorney, right? If you are aware, and most likely you will have already engaged with an attorney as part of that foreclosure process anyway. But I know there's typically a timeline. So if you, the key thing to keep in mind is, at least for Chapter 1311, is to file, that claim, right? And 7, remind me again, you do or don't?
You only file a proof of claim in a Chapter 7 if you get a notice that tells you you must file a proof of claim by X date.
Okay.
Then you have until that date to file, but you usually won't get that notice. I mean, I have seen cases where you do get the notice, but it's a very small percentage, probably 10% or less.
Okay. So make sure that portion is done, and then give Austin a call.
Now, one thing to remember, even if you don't get the proof of claim filed, you have a right to recover. It's just that you're not going to get interest while that plan is in effect. And with Chapter 13, the plan must be a minimum of 3 years or a maximum of 5 years. So you could be sitting out for 3 to 5 years with no interest if you mess up and don't get the proof of claim filed when you're supposed to.
Interesting. So you're not completely up a creek without a paddle, but you're up a creek you don't want to be, not earning any interest. Okay. I guess to kind of get out of the bankruptcy rabbit hole and talk more about title, which is also a fun topic when it comes to tax lien foreclosures. And we hinted at the beginning, but I think the key component that Ohio offers is, at the end of the foreclosure, you actually have a property that or title that is insurable, right? It has insurable title without requiring a separate quiet title action to go through. But that doesn't necessarily say all other liens and fines are extinguished, correct? There are other probably violation fines, et cetera, that might stick through that foreclosure and you're still liable for as the owner of that tax deed or that REO, correct?
Correct. Any IRS lien that's out there, they will have at least 120 days to exercise a right of redemption. I've only seen that exercised once in my career, fortunately, but it does exist. They can do it. They take on a lot of responsibility when they do that. One thing is that helps them, meaning the IRS, is that they can do an interior inspection of the property, and that tells a whole lot of stories. I mean, if we had interior inspections on all of the properties that we foreclosed on, we would grab some, and some we would let go like it was a hot potato.
Yeah.
But that can make or break the deal, and by having that interior inspection, and the IRS is able to do that because the IRS normally will remove the case from state court to federal court, and it's the federal court that gives them the opportunity to have that interior inspection. So that's another thing to look out for, is that just because you file it in XYZ County Court of Common Pleas, it may not always stay there if there's an IRS lien. So the IRS liens will stay there. Any covenants or easements that run with the land, they will stay on the property. You'll be subject to those. And if there is a code violation, the code violation could stay there too, because code violations normally come up with distressed properties that are in disrepair, to some degree. It could be something as simple as an uneven sidewalk, or it could be something more pressing like a leaky basement. And so it depends on what that lien is, but you would still be stuck with those code violations.
Now, is the city with those code violations, do they, I'll put it this way, I've heard of municipalities attempting to foreclose on a property, right, that has a tax lien on it. Is that an acceptable practice in Ohio?
I don't believe it is. There is a statute directly on point, and it's found in 3767.50. That's 3767.50. And that statute, I'll kind of summarize it. It basically says that a municipal corporation has a cause of action in the environmental division of their municipal court, provided that no other foreclosure action affecting the blighted parcel is being actively prosecuted in any court of record. Now, any court of record is significant because it might not be in a court of common pleas where you would find the majority of your foreclosures. It could be in a probate court case. And they could be pursuing a sale of property in the probate estate. So it says in any court of record, which would include the probate court. It also states that section 3767.50 of the revised code does not create a cause of action regarding any property not subject to a lien. The municipal corporation shall not marshal a lien held by the United States, a lien held by the state other than a lien for real property taxes and assessments, a lien held by a political subdivision other than itself, or a lien vested by a tax certificate held under sections 5720.30 to 5721.43. And that is the code sections that our tax certificates in Ohio fall under, is 5721.30 to 5721.43. That's why I believe that this statute is directly on point, that you cannot bring an action against a property that has a tax certificate sold to someone, whether or not they have the action pending. If the tax investor does have a foreclosure pending, then I think you have another defense, and that would be the doctrine of lis pendens, meaning the thing is pending. And that thing pending would be that the foreclosure action is already pending in the court of common pleas, which would be a county court, not the municipal court bringing this action. I think they have a right to bring the action, but not if you have a tax lien on it, and certainly not if you've already filed the foreclosure action in the court of common pleas.
Got it. So, help me understand exactly how it gets to that state. Is it basically a code violation that, obviously if the property might be abandoned, goes unpaid for a long period of time, and the municipality finally says, okay, we've seen enough, we're going to foreclose on that property, right, for that code violation. And meanwhile, the county has sold a tax lien on that property, right? And let's say you're the lien holder, you're within that 1 year time period, you can't foreclose on it yet. You have interest in that property, and then the city decides, hey, I'm going to foreclose on it. And basically what you're stating is the municipality, while that lien is staying out there, is sitting out there, really doesn't have, they can file it, but they don't have any claim to actually complete that foreclosure while that lien is outstanding. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I don't believe that they can actually file the action. And if they do, then I think you have the right as the tax lien investor to step in and say, wait a minute, I have this active tax lien. And another thing to keep in mind is that in every county in Ohio, I believe, except Hamilton, the tax certificates get recorded. And for some reason, Hamilton County absolutely won't record their liens. But in all the other counties, they are actually recorded in the county recorder's office. So there's no real reason that a municipality should not know that a tax lien was filed because it's of record. Now, I have seen in a few cases where their title report that they get before they file the action doesn't include our lien. Don't know what that means other than that some title examiner missed that lien or those liens. And they have some redress on that too. They can go against that title company who issued the preliminary judicial report and make a title claim because they did miss that lien. So the city's still not really out if they don't realize that there is the lien. Now, I've seen some cities that go ahead and file the actions and they hope that that'll spur the property owner or maybe if the property owner is deceased, it will cause some heir to jump in and do something necessary to fix the property up, which actually does help the tax lien investor as well. But you know, it's not a guarantee that that's going to happen.
Got it. Now, is this I'll say practice to for municipalities to file those actions? Is that common throughout Ohio, or is that specific to certain municipalities that you're aware of?
I've seen it happen just in the larger counties.
Okay.
You won't see something like this in one of the small counties in southern Ohio, but in the larger counties, I do see it happening.
Okay. So it's not isolated to a couple counties. It's several of the larger ones, but it's not everywhere per se. Got it. Interesting. Okay. Well, Austin, I don't want to cut it too short. We've covered a lot of ground. I've learned a lot, to say the least, today. Before we end, a couple more questions for you. One is, as far as the process in Ohio, do you foresee any changes to how the current statutes lay out the really two types of sales that can be done? Any changes that are being talked about at the legislative level to change any of that?
I haven't heard of any, not recently.
Not to say they won't throw out a surprise curveball randomly next month, but as of right now there's really no changes. Okay, and then one of my favorite questions I like to ask experts in each state, because each state is different, but if you were to give one piece of advice to investors looking to come into Ohio to avoid the biggest pitfall that you see, what would that piece of advice, or what would be that recommendation from your end of what they can easily do to avoid large issues down the road?
I would say the number one thing that every tax lien investor should do is do very good due diligence before they buy that portfolio of liens in that county. And that may entail having people drive by each site that's going to be on the list for them to purchase, to at least get a curbside view of the property. And there are different companies out there that will take like 3 pictures of each property so that you can at least see, does it have all the windows? Is it boarded up? Is there a hole in the roof? Big things that would, sway your decision one way or the other. That, oh, this is great property, or, oh, this one's, bottom of the barrel. And then along with that is to have an REO strategy, for the properties that you wind up getting the deed for because it didn't sell at that second sale. Do you have an exit strategy for that? It's not just selling the property, but to be able to maintain that property for at least a short term to make it saleable. I mean, you don't want to sell the property, with high grass or, something that could be fixed with a coat of paint. You want to be able to put some money into the property to make it more attractive for someone to buy. Then I would say A third thing that they might want to look at is filing those Board of Revision complaints for when the property is overvalued. And a big part of that is that the tax lien investor should have a state licensed appraiser give the value of those properties. Because if you don't have the state licensed appraiser, if you just go to, say, a realty company and you have somebody give a broker's price opinion, that's objectionable at the Board of Revision. And if you get an attorney on the other side, which in Ohio, if you file a complaint for more than a $50,000 fair market value reduction, the county is required to inform the school board, and you'll find a school board attorney on the other side, and they may bring that up. If they find that your appraiser isn't state certified, they'll bring that up as a grounds for dismissal of your Board of Revision complaint. And then I'll mention one other thing. We kind of touched on it before with insurable title. Title is insurable, but for any person buying a property at sheriff's sale or private selling officer sale, they need to know that they need to buy what's called an owner's policy, because what you have representing a bank or a tax lien investor is a owner's, is the policy for the lien holder. To get an owner's policy, it's a separate policy, and it is usually relatively cheap. And if you go to the title company that issued that preliminary judicial report, you'll usually get a little bit of a discount because they've already done a lien search as of a certain date, just prior to the filing of the foreclosure action. So they really only have to do an update to it. You'll probably get a little better deal, but you can use any title company.
Now, is that something you do before you go to sell it, or is that something that's done?
You should do that when you buy the property and become the successful bidder.
Okay.
Immediately, contract for an owner's policy. In most cases, you'll probably be able to get one for a few $100s, and that's a few $100 well spent.
Got it. Interesting. Well, Austin, I greatly appreciate your time. I'm sure everyone else on immensely appreciates your time as well. We all learned a lot. Hopefully we can do this again sometime and go down a few more of the rabbit holes that we started down, and we try to keep out of it. Anyway, I appreciate it again. I hope to see you soon at an NTLA event in the future, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Brian. And I'll give you a call shortly.
Thanks, everybody.